Thank you guys for having me this evening. I am Jason Oleham, KM4ACK. As I go through this information, I don't mind at all being interrupted. If you've got a question, sometimes I find it's easier to stop right then and answer that than it is to wait to the end, but I will also be happy to take questions at the end of it. So a little bit about me and what got me into ham radio. This is a radar scan from Good Friday of 2009. My hometown is located almost exactly in the middle of the screen. And for those that may not be familiar, well, each of those red boxes was a separate tornado warning that went out that afternoon. And there was quite a bit of damage as a result of that. The images you're looking at on the screen right now, I captured within 1,000 yards of my house. In fact, if you look down in the bottom right image, that car that's parked, the white car is a police car that is parked on the entrance road to my subdivision. So this hit extremely close to home. It was an EF4 tornado, and for those that might not be familiar with tornado ratings, an EF4 carries wind speeds between 166 and 200 miles per hour. It left us with no power or communications for 48 hours, and I was completely unprepared for anything like this. I grew up in the South, but I have never been this close to a tornado, and this one had some unbelievable damage that came with it. Feeling that helpless was not something that I enjoyed after going through that, and I started looking at ways I could prepare or at least be somewhat better prepared should I ever be faced with this again. Now, I started with things that I knew, like generator and food and water. And it wasn't for several years that I learned about this weird thing they called ham radio. And it was my brother-in-law, who's also a ham, that actually introduced me to this crazy hobby. So about 5 years after that event, I sat down and took my tech exam and got my license in 2014. About 3 months later, I upgraded to general, and almost exactly a year after taking my tech exam, I passed the extra exam. Now, marrying computers to radios came almost naturally to me. I've always been a huge geek. I've always enjoyed computers and playing with them. So attaching them to a radio just seemed like a lot of fun. And when I first started tinkering with that, there was a mode that most of you will probably remember called PSK31. And that was all the rage back in the 2014-2015 timeframe. I dabbled with Winlink a little bit, but really didn't understand its full capabilities. And then I started delving into FT8 somewhere around the middle of 2017, and that was followed up pretty closely by another application called JS8 Call. But all of these digital modes were just absolutely fascinating to me. The problem is because of that tornado outbreak, I wanted to focus on emergency communications. And that meant I wanted to run things without any grid power. I wanted to run from batteries. And one of the problems I ran into with laptops is, especially in 2014, is they were a huge power hog. So I started looking at ways that I could maybe reduce that power consumption, but still be able to play with these digital modes with the radio. And that's when I first stumbled across this little single board computer called a Raspberry Pi. And I started looking into it and playing with it. It runs this weird operating system called Linux that most people aren't very familiar with. And it does take a little bit of time to get yourself familiarized with it. But there's a lot of capability in this little single board computer. First of all, it is low power consumption. A typical laptop will draw somewhere around 16 to 19 volts and can take up to 2 or 3 amps to charge the battery once it's depleted. The Raspberry Pi, on the other hand, only consumes about 350 milliamps of power from a 12-volt source. Now, I've got low cost here on the screen. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case with this worldwide chip shortage that we're all experiencing. The Raspberry Pis are very hard to come by, and they can be charging exorbitant amounts of money for them these days. At one time, you could buy one of these guys for about 35 bucks. If you go over to Amazon right now, you're probably looking at $150. However, if you do get on some waiting lists with various websites, you can get them still for $35 to $55 if you're willing to wait. There's a lot of applications that are available for the Raspberry Pi. The vast majority of them are open source. And then there's Build-A-Pi. We'll get back to Build-A-Pi in a minute. So you might be asking, well, what can you do with that little $35 single board Raspberry Pi computer? Well, I'm glad you asked. Winlink is one of the things that we can use on the Raspberry Pi. Now, instead of running Winlink Express that you're probably familiar with, we have the PAT Winlink client. And it's very similar in its function, but it does look quite a bit different than Winlink Express. Just a few of the things that you can do with Winlink is you can send email to other people with Winlink accounts, so other ham radio operators. But one of the nice things about Winlink, if you're not familiar, is you can also send email to regular internet email accounts like Gmail or Hotmail. You can even send text messages from Winlink directly to somebody's cell phone. We can send and receive position reports. We can pass Winlink forms. So a lot of the data and traffic like ICS forms can be included in Winlink. And we can do all of this over RF with no internet required. Now, other things that we can run on the Raspberry Pi are things like FLDigi. And in fact, not just FLDigi, but we can run the entire FLDigi suite. So FLRig for rig control. And what makes the FLDigi suite really powerful is when you start delving into FLMessage and FLWrap. Everybody's favorite digital mode these days is available on the Raspberry Pi. So WSJTX, better known as FT8, is there and available to us. Quite an addictive little application. And it will allow you to quickly fill up a logbook, exchanging a quick call sign, grid square, and signal report with other operators. And then there's JS8 Call. Now, JS8 Call is built on the same protocol as FT8, so we get that same weak signal capability. But with JS8 Call, it's a bit different because we can have actual QSOs via keyboard-to-keyboard chat. And it will do a lot more than that. JS8 Call actually builds its own network through a series of heartbeats and acknowledgments. And it has some other extras built into it, like automatic relays and the ability to leave messages for other operators, even when they're not on the air. And this is just a few of the highlights of JS8 Call. Now, if you're not familiar with it, I've actually done quite a few videos on it. I'm going to leave this slide here for just a second so you guys can jot it down if you're interested in learning more about JS8. Now, earlier I mentioned Build-A-Pi. One of the things that kind of keeps people away from the Raspberry Pi is that oddball OS that it runs called Linux. And people just, they're a little bit intimidated by it, especially if they have to go to the command line and do anything. And it kind of keeps a lot of people away from the little single board computers like the Pis because they just don't quite know where to start with it. Well, that's where Build-A-Pi comes in. Build-A-Pi is a script designed to remove the headaches of installing ham radio applications on the Raspberry Pi. Now, you might ask, well, how is Build-A-Pi different? Maybe you've heard of different images that you can get and load onto the Raspberry Pi. Well, Build-A-Pie is different because with those images, you get all or nothing. Whoever created that image got to make the decision of every single thing that was loaded onto that image before you ever downloaded it. So you don't really have any control over what's installed. Build-A-Pie, on the other hand, gives you complete control to choose what you want and what you don't want during the building process. And it's super easy to get Build-A-Pie up and running. It is literally one command that you copy and paste into the terminal, press return, and everything kicks off. And Build-A-Pie includes all of the software that we've already mentioned, like Winlink and FT8, JS8 Call, FL-Digi. And you can customize it to suit your individual needs. Maybe you don't want to really get into WSJTX. You just want to build an APRS digipeater or maybe a Winlink gateway. Well, you can customize it specifically for what you need. Now, when you run that one command and Build-A-Pie kicks off, it comes up and it asks you for your call sign. So super simple, super easy. Then it's going to present you with 4 different screens. This is the first of those 4 screens, and this is the base applications that you can install. So if you want rig control, you would want to grab HamLib. If you need GPS software, that's available to us. We've got modems like RDOP that are available to us. We've got Direwolf, which is a software TNC, AX25, and the Pulse sound server. To install any of these, you simply put a check mark in that left-hand column and click Next. The next screen you'll be presented with is the FL-Digi suite. And this has got all of those applications in the suite on this one screen. Again, put a check mark by it and click Next. The next screen you'll see is what we call the Ham app. So these are kind of the applications that you would want to play with on a daily basis. You'll see Pat and Pat menu at the top. That's the Winlink client that I was referencing earlier. If you need to program radios, Chirp is available to you. Of course, you've got WSJTX and JS8 Call. If you're into APRS, there's a couple of different clients. Exaster and Yak are both available. There's several different logging applications that you can install, PyQso, CQR log, and hammers, as well as other things like ham clock. So maybe you just want to take a Raspberry Pi, build a clock with that Pi, and have it sitting in your shack. Not only will it tell you the time, but it'll also give you a lot of other interesting information about ham radio. Maybe you want to see propagation reports on that clock, or maybe you want to keep track of satellites. It's as simple as putting a check mark by ham clock and clicking Next. The last screen that you would see is what we call the utilities, and these are just helpful little things that you may or may not want. For instance, maybe you need a dipole calculator because you're like me and you can't remember that formula for how long each leg needs to be. Well, you simply install the dipole calculator, tell it the frequency you want to operate on, and it'll do the math for you. Any of these individual utilities, just like the others, you simply put a check mark by, and this time you're going to hit install. And that's it. It's literally off to the races and will install all of those applications. Now, if you choose to install everything, it'll take it somewhere probably around 3 to 4 hours. At the end, it asks you to reboot. When it reboots, everything is installed and ready to go for you. And here's just a small list of things that you can do with a Raspberry Pi. If you just want to do logging with it, you could simply install the logging software. Maybe you want to run a Winlink gateway. You can do that. Maybe you're interested in old school packet networks. You can actually build a packet network with a Raspberry Pi. And of course, my favorite, APRS iGates and digipeaters. Now let me bring this full circle, and then I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek here. In Nashville of 2020, I'm sorry, in 2020, we had the Nashville Christmas bombing. That bombing targeted the AT&T building in downtown Nashville. And once again, I found myself with no internet and no cell phone. Now, it was a little bit different from the tornadoes because we did not lose power, and I had a communications plan this time. So even sitting here with no cell phone and no internet, I was able to use Winlink to send email not only to other ham radio operators, but also friends and family and let them know that we were okay. My mom was watching the news, and this incident made national news. And of course, being Christmas morning, if you don't talk to mom, she's going to start freaking out. So being able to send her a quick message put her mind at ease. Now, I mentioned a sneak peek, and this is something that I want to show you guys just real quick. It's something we've been working on for a while, and I'm hoping we are getting right at the, I'm hoping we can release this in about the next 7 to 10 days. And it's going to be called 7.3 Linux. This is going to replace Build-A-Pi, but we're not going to make it any more difficult to get this stuff installed. We're only going to expand the capabilities. This is what the new menu system will look like. And you'll notice a lot of the same applications that you saw on the others. Now, I couldn't fit them all on the screen because instead of dividing it up into 4 separate screens, it's going to, we're going to put all of the applications on one screen. You'll be able to sort this by clicking on any of the columns at the top, or you can simply start typing a application's name and it will search for it and highlight it in the menu system. More importantly, though, this is going to be a dynamic menu system that gets rebuilt every single time you run the application. And I'll tell you guys why that's important here in just a second. We're going to break everything down in this next version so that each individual application that needs to be installed is in its own folder. And this is basically just install instructions that we're putting in here. Now, the cool thing about these is anybody will be able to write one of these files and include it in the next version of Build-A-Pi 7.3 Linux. If there's any Linux guys out there in the audience this evening, this is kind of a very simple example of how you could write a BAP file that could be included in Build-A-Pi or 7.3 Linux. Some of the new features that are coming, we're going to support not only the Raspberry Pi, but we're going to support the x86-64 Debian Linux builds. So if you're running Debian Linux on a full-blown laptop, you'll now be able to run 7.3 Linux with the same ease that we've always been able to run Build-A-Pi on the Raspberry Pi. Now, I mentioned that dynamic menu system, and this is where it becomes important because we're going to have support for side-loading applications. So let's say that your club has a custom form that you use in Winlink or FL Message. If you've got a guy in your club that can write out this little BAP file, it could be included in 7.3 Linux for your club members so that it automatically downloaded and installed those forms in the correct locations. Something else new that we've never supported in the past is uninstalling applications. But that is a feature that is coming to this new version. And like I said, anyone can write one of these new BAP files to be able to sideload applications.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Now, 7.3 Linux, is this a separate operating system that you could install on any computer or just a Raspberry Pi?
We are going to support Raspberry Pi and Debian-based Linux. So okay. I'm running 7.3 Linux on the Evolve laptop. If you've been following my channel,
Right.
It's that little $60 laptop that I picked up for Micro Center back during the summer.
Okay, because I've got a Raspberry Pi. Is this something that would install on top of what I already have, or is it just a complete replacement?
No, it will install on top of what you already have.
Okay.
My patrons are actually running it side by side with Build-A-Pi right now. They can start either or. The cool thing about Build-A-Pi and 7.3 Linux, it's not an operating system. It's basically just a set of instructions on how to install or uninstall something.
Okay.
So instead of someone having to go to the command line and figure out how to build an application from source, if you put a check mark by that application, then it goes out and it looks for the instructions to do that and takes care of doing those steps in the correct order for them. Does that make sense? And did that answer the question?
I'm sorry. Yes, it helps considerably because I'm trying to find a good use for my Raspberry Pi than just be to, run TV applications.
No, Build-A-Pi, or if you give us a couple of weeks, 7.3 Linux. But even if you start with Build-A-Pi now, you'll be able to migrate to 7.3 Linux with virtually no issues whatsoever. Upgrading to the latest version.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're interested in learning more about Build-A-Pi, you can follow me over on GitHub at github.com/KM4ACK. And then the other links are there so that you can find me in all the other social media spots as well. And with that, do we have more questions? I'm actually going to kill the slideshow so I can turn my camera back on.
I'm way ahead of you. I found your web.
Can you put that last slide back up there for a second?
Oh, yes. Hold on 1 second here. Let me turn my camera back off. And is that the one you're looking for?
Yeah. Yes. But it's gone. It went away again.
Oh.
Anybody that's not muted, please mute.
Okay, it may have just jumped off of your screen. I'm showing it being presented from my side.
I see it now. Hang on a second.
And Steve Paulson has a hand up also.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Will this work on Pi 3, Pi 4, Keyboard Pi?
Keyboard Pi being the Pi 400. So the Pi 4 and the Pi 400 is a better option. Most of it will work on a Pi 3. The one limitation that I can think of right off the top of my head is Vara. And Vara, there's just not really enough horsepower on the Pi 3 to run Vara. That's having to be emulated in Wine, and that just takes a little bit more horsepower. But if you go to the Pi 4 or the Pi 400, either one of those will be fine.
Any questions for Jason? Apparently.
Excellent presentation. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for having me this evening. And I hope I at least intrigued some people with Linux, because I know that scares a lot of people off, and that's one of the reasons they don't ever play with little gadgets like the Raspberry Pi.
Well, hams are venturous, so hopefully we will see these, see a lot of these coming up.
I see Jeff put the drawing a bit ago, put on the chat. So yeah, Jason, great. You're a great speaker and very good information. I'm one of those that are like you said, is kind of I've got a couple things running with a Raspberry Pi, but I had help from others to get them up and spinning. It seems like I always miss something. So that's great information. Thank you.
Jason, I have a question. This is Larry.
Yes, sir.
Again, thanks for doing this for us. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Did I see someplace where you're playing around with the Evolve laptop? Have you been doing
Yes.
that? What's
Yes.
your initial feeling about that? Because I have a whole stack of those.
It's a $60 laptop. The trackpad is absolute garbage, and I'm absolutely in love with that little computer.
That's what I was wondering, because I crashed out the touchpad when I did an update to it, and then someone told me if you do hit somebody else that has it, so if you hit the escape a bunch of times when you first turn it on and boot up, it apparently will reset it or something.
I haven't had any issues with my trackpad, and I'm being a little unfair to it. I run a MacBook Air most of the time, so I'm comparing a $1,500 trackpad to a $60 trackpad. So that's not really a fair comparison. But overall, I've been super pleased with it. I love the fact that it'll charge off of 12 volts. And I even did a video when you start looking at actual power consumption, it consumes less power than the Raspberry Pi if you put a monitor on a Raspberry Pi.
Okay, great information. I've got, like I said, a stack of them, and I was planning on having some be Linux and some be Windows and use them for portable operations. So I'm glad I noticed that, and thanks for that answer.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to add on that real quick is that the club, we bought a bunch of them for a field day, and we used them for a field day, and it worked perfectly. I would also have to say I ended up putting Anderson power poles on mine, and yeah, it'll run off of a small lithium-ion battery all day long.
Yeah,
it's an awesome little computer. It is a
absolutely
$60 computer, but just keep that in mind. But
well,
it's awesome
there's good and bad to that. Yeah, it's a $60 computer. It's not quite as quick as some of the others, but if it gets knocked off the picnic table, you don't cry near as hard.
Yeah, see, Alex had his hand up, I think there. I'm looking right.
So does Bob, I think.
Bob W0CR had his hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned that if you installed all the applications, it might take 4 hours for it to load them all up. I was just wondering, or something like that, what size of an SD card would it take on the Pi? Do you have an idea on that?
Absolutely. I typically run a 32 gig SD card in mine. Those can be picked up, even the good ones, for about $12 or $13. And that will consume, if you put everything on it, you're probably going to be eating up 8 to 10 gigs of the card. So that leaves you plenty of room to put reference material. I keep manuals for all my radios and any kind of various reference material I need on the SD card, along with all of the applications. So 32 gigs should do nicely for you.
Okay, great. Thank you, and great presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Did we catch Alex? Was that, you had a question, I think?
No, I did not have a question, but I think someone else does now.
Sarah does.
Sarah does. Yeah.
Okay. Sarah, I see you.
She's trying.
Steve Taylor.
Steve has raised his hand, and so did Sarah. But Sarah was first, so you have to wait, Steve.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
All right, Sarah, jump in if I don't. Jason, when under the 73 Linux, are you going to slide that under a tag under PyBuild, or is that a separate repo?
I'm going to end up making a separate repo just so we've got a clean swap. So I'm going to put it out hopefully within the next week to 10 days. I'm still waiting on a few little wrinkles that I need to iron out, but I want to put it out there and let guys be able to test it without just overwriting Build-A-Py. Because it's such a big release and we're changing so much under the hood, I want to make sure that it's good to go before I kind of kill off Build-A-Py.
Okay, real good. Thank you. Oh, also on the Evolve, I have one of those too. Mark got me pulled into that, and I've had I actually pulled out the LTE modem, and you can put in an M.2 SSD in that, so you don't have to write on a separate little thumbnail.
Yep, I've got a 128 gig hanging over here in the shack, just waiting to be installed.
There you go. Cool. Thanks. Good presentation.
Yes, sir. I have spent so much time overwriting the SD card, or not the SD card, but the eMMC card that's in it. I bet I have overwritten that thing 50 times in the last 6 weeks.
And Sarah,
Sarah still got her hand up?
Yeah. How do you guys read me right now?
Good. Go ahead.
Just wanted to give my thanks to you, Jason, for putting everything together. I'm already a happy customer. I absolutely love what you've done with it, and look forward to see where it goes from here. We'll be excited to see, in my own shack or in my own Go box, actually, how 7.3 Linux goes. Anyway, just wanted to give my appreciation.
Thank you, Sarah.
Anybody else with questions before we do the drawing?
and we're up to 14 responses now, Jerry.
Okay, we got 14 people in the drawing. Any last chance? Last call? We'll wait a second here. See if Jeff, if it changes. Jason, if you come up with another presentation, we'd love to have you back. Like I said, you're a great speaker. It's very, very interesting material.
Well, thank you. I'm working on a new one for portable operations. So if you want to reach out to me, maybe right around mid-December, I just need to get this project wrapped up and get it pushed out before I commit to any more speaking engagements.
I'd like to also promote that in our club before the meeting, because I think we get a lot more people joining if we did that, because that's kind of like a big thing with everybody right now. So that would be awesome.
Oh, portable
Jason,
operations?
Yeah.
If you're in Denver on December 21st, you can join us for dinner. We're having our holiday dinner.
There you go. Be our guest speaker, and we'll buy you dinner.
Jason,
where are we at, Jeff?
Still holding at
Somebody
14.
else? Bill? Okay. Bill?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question for Jason. Should we just keep checking, say, that GitHub link over the next few weeks to see when you've got something out for 73 Linux?
Oh, there's going to be a video coming to announce that. That's a pretty big announcement. So there will be a video that comes out and lets people know that it's available and it's out there. If you're watching GitHub, you might get access to it a few days earlier because I am going to have to make that repo live in order to finalize everything right before I do the video.
Okay. Well, that sounds good because I'm really interested in that.
Okay.
And thanks for the great presentation.
We still at 14 there, Jeff? If so, spin the barrel.
Okay, here we go. And the winner is K0KPS. Kevin, congratulations.
Okay, I'll write that down here, Kevin.
Thanks a lot.
Congrats, Kevin.
Don't spend it all in one
Uh,
place,
Yeah.
or I guess do.
So you can take that 25 out there and put a 400 or 500 with it, and you'll be in shape. All righty. Well, again, thank you, Jason, and we'll definitely get back with you. Unless there's
All right.
anything else, we'll shut it down here. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot.
Yes,
I
sir.
guess that's
All right.
it.
7-3, guys. Have a great night.
7-3. Good night.
See you, everybody.
Good night.